up, Tamara St. talks about the 6-year effort to bring Native ceremonies to the Army's repatriation process. 2 Indigenous women tell us why it's important to base themselves on the land as they wait for the wildfire evacuation orders to be lifted. And we speak with artist John Isaiah Pepion about his ledger art. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Thank you for joining us. We start today in Pennsylvania, where a repatriation process is underway for the remains of 5 children who died at the Carlisle Industrial School in the 1800s. For the first time, there will be ceremonies included after a historic pact was signed last week between 2 tribes and the U.S. Army. ICT's Stuart Huntington has this story.
The school grounds are today Army property, and previous repatriations were governed by Army protocols that banned Indigenous ceremony and held that remains be handed only to next of kin, not to tribes. 2 tribes fought those rules for 6 years. Tamara St. from the Sisseton-Wahpeton Oyate has been engaged from the start.
First of all, it has been a fight for sovereignty. For us as a sovereign nation to be able to take control of this process and do things the way that we know they need to be done by our protocols, our spirituality, and ultimately to bring our children home with honor.
The new agreement allows the tribes to perform any requisite ceremonies at critical junctures of the process. It also allows the remains of Amos Laframboise from the Sisseton-Wahpeton Oyate and Edward Upright from Spirit Lake to be turned over to the care of their tribes.
The Army's policy of next of kin really doesn't work. These children, like Amos, died in 1879. He does not have children and descendants. You're having to find those collateral descendants. You know, it's an overwhelming, often impossible task. So to say that the Army's policies are overly burdensome is an understatement.
The tribes will also construct a sweat lodge on the former school grounds, a development hailed by attorney Beth Wright, who helped draft the pact.
You know, when we think of boarding schools, and especially Carlisle, the purpose of boarding schools was to prevent children from engaging in their traditional practices. And this is a way for the tribe to bring those practices back to their children who were prevented from having these ceremonies and these religious practices. And that's incredible.
The tribes did not get from the Army an understanding that a federal law governing Native remains known as NAGPRA and not Army rules would control future repatriations. But they were happy with the agreement even as they eyed the future.
The tribe's goals were to make this process easier for the tribes that are coming next and the tribes that will continue to request the return of their children from other boarding schools.
Our belief is that NAGPRA does apply. We do not believe that the Army should be exempt. And this is just the beginning. This is, I've said so often lately, the tip of the iceberg. There are many, many boarding schools coming.
Reporting from Carbondale, Colorado, Stuart Huntington, ICT News.
Now to Brazil, where an endangered river has gained personhood in the fight to protect it. The Comimemem River, named Laje on non-Indigenous maps, is vital to the people who have inhabited the western Amazon for centuries. In June, the municipality of Guajará-Mirim passed a groundbreaking law led by Councilman Francisco Oro Warrum that was to designate the Comimemem and its tributaries as living entities with rights, including maintaining their natural flow and protecting the forest around it. The councilman says his village no longer drinks water directly from the river due to pollution from cattle farms and soybean crops. He hopes the new law will protect the water and the surrounding lands. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. In Canada, wildfire evacuation orders are still in place for many First Nations territories. APTN's Carly Schogner talked with two longtime friends as they shared their thoughts on traditional fire management and mental health.
Longtime friends Julie Beaver of Fort Smith and Faye Avagana of Hay River, originally from Inuvik, found themselves both evacuating to Fort Resolution, grateful to be out on the land rather than out of territory and in a city. Beaver describes the day they were told to evacuate Fort Smith, August 13th.
It was like the apocalypse, as a lot of people would say. Like, it was really eerie, and it was early evening, so it was interesting to look at the sky and see how dark it was and red, and then you look at your time, and it was like 4 in the afternoon.
Avigana said she's not new to experiencing natural disaster evacuations, including having gone through the May 2022 flash floods. She's learned she didn't want to choose a city hotel evacuation and to keep busy helping community.
Despite being displaced again for the 4th time, I am grateful that I'm here, because the 3rd time that I was evacuated, I had gone to Yellowknife and was in a hotel room, and it was. I'm not, like I said, I was grateful that they covered our hotel, but it was what they said. It wasn't what was comfortable for me, right? Being out at Mission Island in Fort Resolution has been a blessing for me, because I am enjoying the cultural week that is going on there, and I pray a lot for the communities that are affected. I pray for protection for my family that's traveling through fires.
We are really connected to the land, and we spend a lot of time out at our cabin north of Fort Smith. And for me, being here, I've just really tried to think about, how to stay connected. Like, I've gone out picking spruce gum. My daughter and I, we made our way to the water today, to the Great Slave Lake, and offered prayers and tobacco.
Using Starlink to call because of telecommunication outages, they urge authorities to make evacuation announcements much sooner so that there is less panic, and that authorities take seriously going to elders and knowledge keepers on traditional burning practices going forward.
Well, growing up, my dad was a firefighter, and so I've heard a lot of stories about how, there's been fires throughout history, but they've never been allowed to get as big as these fires have been. I think these are the biggest in NWT's history, to take as many things with the fire, to take as many trees as it's taken. Driving through the burn, there's the trees that we cut down last year for our firewood. It's no longer is there thought into that now we will have to travel further to get the firewood to keep us warm in the winter in both places. So my dad burns wood in his house in Fort Smith, and we burn wood out at the cabin. It's a trek already by snow machine to go and get firewood. I don't know where we're going to go and get, or how long it's going to take for us to get the firewood. Mm-hmm. So it's those kinds of things, like there has to be some kind of a balance, and how do we get that back? I believe it definitely belongs with bringing in the elders and talking about it. What's happening right now with the government is you have these young people who finish their masters and think that they know everything, and they're not willing to talk to the elders. That's the way we were raised, is the elders have the knowledge, they hold the knowledge, and it has to come back to that, or we're not going to have a place to live in anymore.
The mothers remain grateful for the Fort Resolution hospitality. Carly Schogner, APTN National News, Inuvik.
Tamara St. John worked for years to get the remains of one of her tribal ancestors returned home from a cemetery at the Carlisle Indian Industrial School. The road seemed headed for a dead end, but with some help from attorneys at the Native American Rights Fund, it ended in a historic pact that added ceremony to Carlisle repatriations. St. John spoke with ICT's Stuart Huntington last week about the effort.
This has been a 6-year battle to try to find a means to facilitate this. The Native American Rights Fund people had been able to break through for us and build that bridge with the Army to even have the conversation to develop an agreement. Sisseton, Wahpeton, and Spirit Lake are one family. We are under the same treaty of February 19th, 1867, and our battle has been to be able to do things together in the way that we know that we need to do, with our spirituality, with our protocols, using our resources and our experts to be able to do this and bring them home. And, the ongoing conversations have been confusing. Our communication has been sporadic at best over the 6 years. And if you recall, the Army's policy of next of kin really doesn't work. It doesn't work for most people. They have resulted in this long 6 years, a 6-year wait to bring them home because we weren't able to at one point find the actual name of the father of one of them, or the fact that there are no historical records in 1879 that would name a child. It's an immense undertaking to try to meet that Army policy standard. We as a tribe have that right to be able to facilitate these things in the best interest of our families, our community, and our children. We know best. We know how to take care of our people, and to let us do these things in a way that honors our spirituality. The boarding schools were intended, and certainly Carlisle is probably the most notorious, known for to kill the Indian, save the man, that kind of mentality. And so to move that all the way to this process and to have ceremony or prayer in our language and in our ways of prayer, our spirituality, our protocols, to be able to do that right there at Carlisle, the very place that was intended to erase those things, is really a tremendous, tremendous, I think, success for us and for other tribes. One elder had said to me, you know, these young men would have been chiefs had this not happened to them. And when you bring them home, you bring them home wrapped in buffalo robes like the chiefs that they are. And so we made that commitment to do that. And you notice in the agreement, there is not only those elements of spirituality, prayer, and protocol with our traditional societies and our spiritual practices, but also the buffalo robes, that the Army will be supplying those buffalo robes. Typically, they would do the American flag, the slow salute, transfer ceremony. And in this instance, you know, we feel this is not their story. That is not their story, that of a soldier. We need to define the narrative and share the truth of history, the truth of who they are, and what happened there, so that our modern generations are able to understand and maybe understand where we are today. This whole story has been about everything related to education and history. And those are things that I think in many states, in many communities, we fight for those things, to be able to share our history in truth in our own voices. And in this instance, instead of the military cemetery policy dictating the transfer ceremony of like a soldier, you know, we are doing this the way that we know is best, a way that is with family love, with truth and honor.
Tamara St. John, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for the work you do.
Ledger art has become a popular style across various tribes. Plains artist John Isaiah Pepion from the Blackfeet Nation has the history and significance behind the art form. Here is ICT's Paris Wise with the interview.
One of the first starts of ledger art was in the 1800s when the government started forcing assimilation policies on the Indigenous peoples of America and Canada, and started putting us on reservations and start locking us up for living the life that we live, say as hunting buffalo, going on raids, or just protecting our people and feeding our people. And they wanted us to farm and stay on reservations, so they start sending warriors and women to penitentiaries. And one penitentiary after an old Spanish fort in Florida was called St. Augustine, Florida, which is still exists today. They were sent there. Started out with more of Southern Plains warriors like Southern Cheyenne and like some of the tribes that are now in Oklahoma were shipped out there on train for a couple years there. Some eventually died there. I think there was even a couple women locked up there with them. But the soldiers start giving them used ledger paper from the government, or blank paper, crayons, colored pencils, ink, and then the warriors start drawing the lives that they couldn't live no more. They were drawing battle scenes, courting scenes, their dreams, what they were used to living on a lot of the ledger paper that's considered Fort Marion ledger art. So that was a period of ledger art. And ledger art is over 100 years old, and there are several periods. And the period we're in now is contemporary ledger art, where men and women do it now, and several tribes do it besides Plains tribes. So kind of got its start there, and then it continued on. Another period is the reservation period, where Indian agents were encouraged warriors such as Sitting Bull to draw their lives on ledger paper. So that's why Sitting Bull has a few ledgers out there.
So you're mostly known for your ledger art. What was the inspiration behind some designs in your ledger art, and where did the love for it begin?
I see a lot of it is stemming from my tribe, which is Blackfeet, also known as Piikani here in Montana, inspired by our designs that we use in ceremony and our even our older designs that are passed down to like our teepee designs, our parfleche designs, our winter counts. And then growing up in a family of artists, I had a passion for pictographic style art and ledger art all my life.
Your art takes many different forms too. You recently had a collaboration with 8th Generation and you released some earrings. Can you talk about that?
It's been an amazing journey with 8th Generation. So I'm an artist collaborator with them. I represent the Plains region. I've been with them since 2018, and we just released a line of metal earrings because we started out doing wood earrings and then they kind of like faded out. Then we did acrylic earrings, and so we let them kind of fade out. Now we're into metal earrings. I'm part of a Inspired Native project, which was started by Louis Gong, who was the founder of 8th Generation. It's been a program, like an entrepreneurship program. So they gave me the tools to start my own business. So with 8th Generation, I started my own business, more of a e-commerce business. So I have all these products, especially my original art, and I ship directly from my home to my customers. So the people that are buying on my website are buying from me directly. And so, yes, I released a few blankets with them and socks, earrings, notebooks, and I'm getting ready to release another blanket and some more towels and some more stuff for the holidays with them.
You've done some murals as well, some of which have been at schools. What would you say to youth who are interested in art and the importance of art in schools?
I think that art saves lives, especially if you feel hopeless as a youth and nowhere to turn. And I feel art is therapy. Sometimes I've witnessed students that came in and said they didn't like art or want to participate. Took them a few days or a few weeks, and then you couldn't stop them and are great artists themselves. I believe everybody are artists, and then I think it's up to you if you want to choose to create art, because like I said, it's in all of us, especially as Indigenous people. We are creative, whether we're singing, dancing, beading, writing, and nowadays with technology, we can do all kinds of art or media, even writing.
And earlier this year, you gave some lectures at Yale University. Can you tell us about that experience?
It was a great experience. I was invited out actually by a non-Indigenous student who happened to be part of their Indigenous Studies program and found me on Instagram. And then we worked out all these opportunities and ideas. So I went out to Yale and gave some lectures to students and visited a few places, but also visited the Yale Peabody collection of items from my tribe and building a relationship with the museum, and also looked at the Beinecke collection. Went to the Beinecke Library where there's numerous thousands of items and things from around the world. It's one of the world's biggest collections of all kinds of history and books. So they have a lot of Native American, even original ledger art in there. So I researched a lot of original ledger art. Some of it from Fort Marion, some of it from Carlisle, some of the Kiowa Five, and a lot of stuff from my community. And it was a blessing because me coming from my community here in Montana and reading about the stuff they had and knowing about the stuff they had and actually seeing it in person was a blessing.
Yeah, what was it like to see some of those pieces?
It was awesome, and it was great because I know for a fact that some of the stuff they had of ours hasn't been touched or seen by a person in our community in years. So everything has a collective spirit. So with that, it was great handling, and I just reminded our ancestors that we are still here and that someday they will come home.
How do you approach your ledger art?
As most artists, I can't work in a negative space or around negative energy, so I have to have a clear mind. and good thoughts. So I usually start out with ideas, and I have so many ideas running through my head since I was a kid. So I just got to be inspired. Lately, I'm inspired by birds. I love birds. So I usually get a piece of paper. I don't choose the writing or the date. I just choose the size and how it looks, the texture. Like if it's kind of like um, older, more gray, or if it's more lighter, depends. And I draw right on the ledger paper. I sketch right on it, erase my marks, add the ink, and then the details. And so every piece is just chosen at the moment of time because I have different pieces of paper laying around. Sometimes I just dig through it and find one that just appeals to me at the moment.
And how can people see your art in the meantime or get one of your pieces?
I have a website, which is just my name, John Isaiah Pepion, and they could find my social media through there. I post a lot on Instagram daily, sometimes on my Facebook. I even have a Facebook art page. But you can find a lot about what I'm doing on my website, and has all the products I have on there. I try to keep updated with my originals, and then I share what I can, even with my shows or where I'm showing on Instagram.
John Pepion, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Be sure to join us on the next ICT Newscast. We will learn about how Native Americans are more likely to develop Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.